The story begins in a large city at night with bustling streets. Then, a news report announces that a hunter van is bringing some very bad news. The hunters from South Korea have failed at a gate again and were saved by the Japanese. Because of this, people online are upset and posting some really mean comments about them. Inside a car, a first responder complains that it's ridiculous for them to earn more money even when they fail. Then, the same guy says that now all they can do is trust the rookie hunters, right? But a young man named Seo Yol, the head of the rescue department, just ignores it all, scrolling on his phone. The purple-haired young man says this is a problem the hunters themselves should solve. With that, he tells the team to focus on the emergency call they're heading to now. And so, the driver then complains that guild hunters are all the same, and they're the ones who get the short end of the stick. Seo-yol looks thoughtful, as if he's already used to all this complaining. He's part of an organization where most of the awakened members are mid-level. This organization is divided into 3 departments: vanguard, surveillance, and rescue. Their work is very dangerous and involves saving people from terrible monsters. At this moment, the protagonist shows a strange power emanating from his hands. With that, his eyes begin to glow brightly, indicating he's activated his ability. The young man's power seems to be able to restore things, like a wall that was destroyed, and soon, they arrive at their destination, a giant gate that has opened in the middle of the city. The team leader asks everyone to focus because the situation is very serious, and so, he warns them that they're going in the gate to rescue members of a guild, so they need to be extremely careful. Suddenly, an older, white-haired man appears and calls out to them, and so Yol glares at the newcomer with contempt, thinking he has a lot of nerve to be there. The man is Baek Jung-won, an executive from the powerful guild called Overcross. This guild has a terrible reputation because it only cares about money, not about people's lives. And so the rescue team tries to get past him, but the old man blocks their path on purpose. Baek then offers his guild's help with a fake smile on his face. But Yol accuses him, saying the incident was their fault and he just wants to clean up his image. The young man refuses the help and says they do their own work without needing him, and the executive then just watches the rescue team approach the dangerous gate. Baek Jung-won looks displeased at being completely ignored by the boy. Inside the gate, in a place that looks like a jungle, a girl asks her friend to stay with her. She says she's already sent an emergency request and that rescue should be arriving soon. Meanwhile, 2 monsters approach and the young woman begs her friend not to pass away, and the girl is terrified when she sees the monsters are about to attack them. With that, one of the creatures lunges forward with its glowing claws towards the helpless young woman. She shuts her eyes tightly, expecting the worst in that desperate moment. But suddenly, something very fast rushes past her, blocking the beast's strike. A young man with an electric spear appears out of nowhere and easily defeats the monster. Right after, he positions himself in front of the girl to protect her from the other creatures. With a concerned look, the young man asks the girl if she's okay. He then introduces himself, saying the first responders have finally arrived to rescue them. Just then, one of his companions shouts his name to get his attention, and so the leader warns that the path they came from is full of monsters, and they need to find another way out. Seo then activates his ability, and his eyes begin to glow brightly. Using his power, he can sense the presence of all the monsters in the area. This way he's able to map out the entire path and see where the creatures are. He scans the whole area in search of a safe escape route for everyone, and finally, he finds a place where they can pass through without being attacked. The protagonist focuses on a large door that seems to be the only exit from that place. He tells his boss he's found an escape route, and the man praises the boy for his good work. Then the team leader picks up the rescued girl so they can escape faster. With everything ready, the entire team starts running, following the path Yol indicated. But the rescued girl seems a little suspicious of the route they are following. The leader explains that their locator is only a rank D but has top-notch skills. He guarantees that the young man's detection skills are the best in the country, so there's nothing to worry about. Suddenly, a giant monster appears in front of them, ready to attack at any moment. Even so, one of the team members manages to defeat the creature with a single blow. The leader then asks Yul if he is sure this is the right way, because the monsters keep appearing and are multiplying more and more. The rescue team finds itself in a tough spot, surrounded by enemies on all sides. Amid the chaos, one of the first responders defends the rescued girl with his sword. Meanwhile, Yul, with his glowing eyes, faces one of the monsters without fear, and the young man watches one of his companions fighting and realizes they are in a big jam. Right after, a horde of hideous creatures appears, completely surrounding the team. The protagonist breaks into a cold sweat seeing the number of enemies they will have to face. Suddenly, a staff hits the ground, and a purple energy starts to spread everywhere. This energy forms a huge magic circle, trapping part of the rescue team. The group's leader is shocked, not understanding what is happening at that moment. But Yol immediately realizes they have fallen into a trap, and that it's a magic circle. He desperately yells for everyone to get out of the circle as fast as possible. Then a mysterious hooded monster appears, revealing itself as the source of the magic. 2 team members are thrown out of the circle by the force of the magic. The leader then shouts for Yul to forget him and run to save himself from that place. But at that same moment, he's hit by a powerful impact and feels immense pain. He's pulled into the magic circle while pushing Yul out, sacrificing himself, and so the young man falls to the ground and looks back, seeing his leader trapped in the deadly snare. The man is caught in the purple energy, gritting his teeth in anger and pain, and so, Yul tells him to wait and that he will get him out of there no matter what. But his boss yells at him not to get any closer because it's too dangerous, and so he orders the young man to flee with the others, or they will all perish right there. The leader seems determined in his sacrifice to save the rest of the team. He clenches his teeth hard, showing all his determination in enduring the pain. With a farewell look, he turns and accepts his fate in that situation. But Yul tells him not to treat him like a lost cause, because he's not going down. The protagonist then enters the magic circle, facing the monsters head on, so a voice asks if he was planning to play with them from the beginning. The young man faces the enemy with a defiant look, and his eyes glow intensely. The dungeon boss, a skeletal monster named Kurikal, finally reveals himself. The creature confirms with a sinister smile that this was the plan all along. Yul then replies that if they let him live, he might tell them the details of the plan. The monster then says it just needs to turn the young man into a ghoul to know everything, because after that, it will be able to find out the answer it wants without any trouble. At that, the protagonist's body begins to be corrupted by the circle's purple energy, and the evil magic spreads rapidly throughout his body without stopping for a second. With that, the young man starts to scream in pain, feeling the dark power consuming him, and so his leader watches everything from a distance, unable to do anything to help his companion. Yul then remembers the greedy hunters who only care about money. He recalls how many end up in a bad way because of pure greed. But he also remembers the hero who saved him when he was just a child. That mysterious man just apologized to the scared little boy at the time. That day, the young man saw that hunter crying in front of him, heartbroken. This powerful memory is what motivates the protagonist to always keep fighting. That's why he yells that there's no way he's going down in this place. A powerful golden energy suddenly erupts from his body, and so his power spreads throughout the dungeon, illuminating everything around him. He needs to find anything that can help him get out of there alive. Even if it's a small possibility, he can't give up now. With his eyes glowing, he scans the entire place with his ability. Finally, the young man finds a strange stone pillar with glowing runes. The writings on the pillar shine brightly, instantly catching his attention. The young man is exhausted and out of breath, but he has found a new hope to live. The dungeon boss is surprised and says that he's trying quite hard, but he says he'll end his suffering and sends his monsters to attack. With that, Yul is surrounded by the creatures that charge at him relentlessly. The protagonist faces it all with a determined look, showing no fear. That pillar he found earlier begins to slowly crumble in the background. Then the young man attacks one of the monsters, clearing a path through the enemy horde, and his eyes show all the desperation and the will to survive that he has, and so then shouts loudly that he accepts the offer of that mysterious pillar. A system window appears, saying that he has accepted the class change mission. A blue energy surrounds the protagonist as the monsters advance to attack him with everything they have, and so the young man is surprised by the light surrounding him, but it seems to be protecting him. Suddenly, he is transported to a strange space full of floating screens and data. Then the scene changes to a dark place where we see a monster's foot with sharp claws. The dungeon boss is shocked by what is happening and doesn't understand a thing. He looks up and sees the same data screens that the protagonist saw before. With Yul is back in the tutorial area, but now he seems much more serious. He sees a system window and discovers his old class is gone, wondering if he has reawakened. The young man starts to think that if he really has reawakened, then this place is the tutorial area where it all began for him as a hunter. The young man analyzes the system screen to better understand his new current situation. He says he understands the rest, but it seems there's something that is still bothering him, and then a holographic interface appears in front of him with more information. He realizes it's a map and is surprised by how easy it is to understand. The green dot on the map indicates his current location within that strange place. The red dots, on the other hand, show where all the goals are scattered across the map. The holographic map reflects in his eye as he plans his next move. With all the information in hand, the protagonist seems confident about the challenge. Then, with a smirk, he says that everything is fine and he's ready to start. He prepares himself with a determined look and says it's time to begin the hunt. And so with that, the young man starts to move quickly through the dark corridors of the location. And soon, he finds one of the horrible creatures he needs to defeat to survive. Using a weapon that glows blue, he attacks the monster with a precise strike. The purple-haired young man says that now there are only 4 monsters left for him to defeat. He is standing on top of a defeated monster and uses the creature's claw as a weapon. Suddenly, a giant golden eye appears and scans the entire map again. Next, the young man uses his blue energy to fight another beast that appears. A window shows that there are 10 goals left and he only has 11 hours to finish. With his ability, he can see an enemy's location through the wall. The map now shows that there are only a few red dots left for him to eliminate. The young hunter seems quite surprised by what he is seeing now. Right after, one of the monsters he defeated appears on the ground, lifeless, but Yul remains serious and alert, as he feels the danger isn't over yet. Then a new creature emerges from the shadows right behind him for a surprise attack. The young man says the monster startled him but thanks it for coming to be defeated alone. The creature then shows its sharp claws, preparing for combat. Yul, with a smile on his face, calls the enemy sneaky for joining the group. At that moment he realizes it's not just one monster, but a group of ghouls. The hunter regrets not checking the map and is now in the worst possible situation. With a focused look, he starts to think of a plan to get out of this jam. Suddenly the protagonist finds himself in a high place, surrounded on all sides. He then begins to devise a strategy as if he were in a game of chess. With his plan in mind he runs, using the map to guide him along the way. The young man breaks into a cold sweat because he knows his strategy is very risky. The monsters are chasing him with everything they've got, and are getting closer to catching him. Desperate, he shouts that he won't go down here and asks for something he can use. With that, the system activates 3 of his skills: Silent Wave, Sixth Sense, and Synesthesia. The young man then challenges the monsters, telling them to try their luck if they can. So a green aura surrounds him as he prepares to use his new abilities. The power emanating from him seems to be able to manipulate the environment around him. But he is surprised to see a new function appearing on the map screen. The function shows a hand rotating the crystal that represents his location, and not understanding at all, the young man wonders what this rotation function means. Meanwhile, a giant monster advances to attack him with its sharp claws, and suddenly, the scenery begins to spin and the monsters are thrown from side to side. The creatures are confused, not understanding what is happening to the place. Yul then realizes that this is the correct way to use his new ability. With a confident smile, he says this will make the hunt much easier. He uses the rotation ability to disorient all the enemies at the same time. With that, the hunter charges towards the monsters, taking advantage of their confusion. With his blue energy, the young man attacks one of the monsters with a powerful blow. The creature is hit head on and begins to disintegrate in front of him. Just then, another enemy with a red aura runs down the corridor towards him. Suddenly, a beam of green energy is fired from an unknown source. With that, the monster is hit by the beam and seems to feel the strong impact. The creature then falls to the ground, completely defeated by the mysterious attack. Taking advantage of the confusion, the last monster tries to flee, running desperately, but the protagonist leaps towards it, ready to finish off the last target. He lands a punch charged with blue energy right in the creature's face. The impact is so strong that the monster's face begins to deform completely. Even so, the beast manages to grab the young man's arm with great force. The young man is caught by surprise, but a yellow energy begins to glow. Suddenly, a giant golden eye appears, releasing immense power, and this energy explodes with full force, hitting the monster that was holding him. And so, he then yells that he's not going down there and delivers a spinning kick to the creature. So back in the real world, heavy rain falls on the city where all happened. And so Yul's companions are arguing because one of them wants to go back to rescue him, but the one with glasses says the gate has disappeared, so there's no way to find him. In the middle of the discussion, someone appears calmly eating a popsicle. It's Yul, who approaches with an umbrella and asks why they're so upset. Everyone's jaws drop, unable to believe their senior is right there. The young man then tells them to grab some ice cream and head home. Later, on a busy street, the young man seems to be thinking about something. He then activates one of his new abilities, a sphere of blue energy. This is a skill that can trap opponents inside a labyrinth. It allows one to enter and exit, but the enemies become stronger if they escape. Since it's invisible to others, it would be easy to trap anyone inside. But to survive against strong enemies, he needs more monsters. He remembers the intense battle he had to acquire this new ability. With this, the protagonist seems determined to become stronger with his labyrinth. The protagonist is sitting down when a girl approaches to talk to him. This young woman named Yan. He offers the young man an apple with a smile, and he accepts the fruit, and she explains that her mother asked her to deliver it to him. The young man is surprised by the quantity, but she says it's a sign of friendship. With that, the two begin to walk together, and he asks how school life is going, and the student seems a bit uncomfortable when answering about her school. But the young man eats the apple and says that life at school is always the same, and suddenly, they hear a woman screaming desperately in the middle of the street. Police officers are holding back a lady who is begging them to save her daughter, she yells that the child is still trapped inside a hotel room nearby. Yul looks at the building and suspects it's a dungeon break and not a fire, and so a pink gate at the top of the building confirms the young hunter's suspicion. He then hands the apples back to the girl, and she asks why. The young man says he needs to go to work for the rescue department now. The police are on the scene, trying to maintain order and keep onlookers away. One of the police officers tries to stop the protagonist from crossing the caution tape, but the young man shows his identification from the Seoul Rescue Department. The officer calms down and says that backup should arrive soon, but Yul goes ahead. At this, the police officer tries to stop him, saying he can't do that. He warns that there's a group of red goblins inside and it's dangerous, but Yul replies that this is exactly why he needs to hurry. The young man reminds the officer that a child is still trapped inside the hotel, and he says that since the hunters haven't arrived, he needs to go in their place. The young man then says it's okay because he's not actually alone. With a determined look, he enters the hotel to begin the rescue mission. The hotel's revolving door slowly closes behind the protagonist. Inside the hotel, he finds a terrible scene with several people on the floor. The young man then tells anyone hiding nearby to come out right away. Something moves very quickly towards the protagonist in the blink of an eye. Several red goblins jump from the upper floor and attack the young man by surprise. But the young man says with a smile that this is typical goblin behavior. He then uses his ability and creates a sphere of blue energy in the middle of the lobby. With this, all the monsters are sucked into the sphere without being able to escape. One of the goblins with a hood seems to be stronger and resists the sphere's power, but he too ends up being pulled in by a beam of blue energy. The protagonist then levitates and flies towards the sphere to enter it as well. Inside he sees the disoriented goblins, ready to be hunted by him. Suddenly a giant golden eye appears, observing everything from above in the labyrinth. With a confident smile, Yul introduces himself as the master of that labyrinth. A red goblin, a one-star monster, runs towards another creature. This species of goblin moves around its leader and is not much different, but a purple monster from the labyrinth intercepts it, and a great battle begins. The leader of the red goblins seems to be enjoying the fight. Suddenly more goblins appear and jump on top of the purple monster altogether. But Yul says that's not gonna happen because he controls everything in there. Then a wall of green energy rises from the ground and blocks the goblins' attack. They slam into the wall and get stuck, unable to help their companions. With that, the other goblins that were free are easily defeated by the monster. The young man then realizes they were trying to trick him while he wasn't looking. He says it's good to have the orbs hunting on their own, but he needs to keep an eye on them. With a serious look, he states that inside the labyrinth, they are the ones who will be hunted. Meanwhile, in one of the hotel rooms, a little girl is hiding in fear. She cries softly, covering her mouth so as not to make any noise and be discovered. Suddenly, Yul opens the closet door and says she doesn't need to worry anymore. The young hunter walks calmly through the now safe hotel corridors. The little girl follows him and asks if he really defeated all the goblins by himself. With a gentle smile, he answers yes, and that she is safe with him now. The young man looks to the side and sees holograms of monsters that are now part of his labyrinth. Outside, the elevator door opens, revealing a very strange scene. With a serious look, he realizes that something is wrong and he needs to be very alert. The elevator reaches the 17th floor and the golden door slowly opens. He tells little Sami that the elevator is working now, so she can go down. But the young man replies that he needs to get the last monster that was left behind. Alone in the hallway, he realizes that it was exactly as he thought about the problem. Inside his sphere, the Red Goblin King is fighting against his monsters. With a serious and determined look, the protagonist prepares for the final confrontation, and then accesses his labyrinth's interface to enter the dimension. With that, a portal opens, and the young hunter enters the labyrinth for the battle. Arriving there, he is impressed with the mess the fight has caused in the place, and his monsters are down on the ground, and he sees the extent of the destruction there. He then tells the Goblin King to stop bothering his orbs and face the master. With his ability, he creates a holographic wall to separate the enemy. The powerful Red Goblin King appears before him with a flaming weapon. The protagonist then beckons him to the fight with a very confident hand gesture. The creature becomes furious, and its fist catches fire as it faces the human before it. With that, it advances and attacks the young man with its weapon, yelling that it will finish him. Even with the attack coming his way, the young man remains calm and fearless. He dodges the blow with great ease, showing his great agility. The hunter feels his body light despite the fatigue, and his eyes shine with power. He thinks that at first, he just wanted to test his skills using the goals, but now he wonders if he can handle fighting the boss alone. The monster attacks again, but the young man dodges once more with a quick movement, and then he counterattacks with a powerful blue energy beam that goes towards the enemy, but the creature manages to block the attack with its weapon, which starts to shatter. Just then, the young man appears in front of the monster and lands a fiery punch on its face. The Goblin King is thrown far away by the force of the blow and hits the wall. The protagonist lands gracefully on the ground after his devastating attack, and he then thanks the monster for intentionally throwing him away. And seeing the injured creature, he asks if it can still lift its weapon. With the situation resolved, the young man turns away with a very calm expression. The young man says he can check on that and asks where all the earlier momentum went. He taunts the monster, saying he invested 2 million in it, and it would be a shame if it were already tired. Angrily, the Goblin King says that as the king of the horde, he will put on a proper display. And with a mocking look, the young hunter continues to provoke the creature with questions. He asks if the monster is afraid of him, and this makes it even more furious. And the creature then slams its weapon on the ground with all its might, and the place begins to shake. With a battle cry, it charges towards the young man to end it all for good. But Yul says he really wanted to see this through. With a very serious look, The monster runs at full speed, but suddenly chains emerge from the ground and trap it. The chains pull it up and leave it hanging in the air, unable to move. The Goblin King tries to break free in every way, but it's completely useless. With a victorious smile, the young man bids farewell to his opponent with a goodbye, and suddenly, the ceiling comes down with full force, overpowering the creature trapped there. The chains are now empty, and the ground is covered with what was left of the enemy. The protagonist observes the result of his trap with a satisfied expression. He then accesses his labyrinth's interface and sees the cost of the trap he used. The young man says the performance of this trap is very reliable for fights. Back at the hotel, he gets out of the elevator, tired and with several bandages on his body. Suddenly, someone calls him, and he turns to see who is there. And so it's his leader, who questions him about what he was doing alone in that place. He asks if it's true that the young man defeated all the goblins by himself. The squad leader gets angry and asks about all the injuries he has. But the young man says he might remember everything if he buys him a nice steak dinner. Suddenly, a man in a suit approaches and interrupts their conversation. He introduces himself as Kwon Sung-soon, section chief of the Hanwol Guild, and asks for a moment. Yul then agrees to talk to the man, and his leader just watches. The man thanks the young man for his cooperation in resolving the hotel's dungeon break. He then gets straight to the point and moves closer to the protagonist to speak, and the section chief asks him not to give interviews to reporters about the incident, and so he explains that his guild doesn't want this matter to spread to the public. The protagonist understands how guilds silence people and even agrees with the man. There is a huge difference between low-rank hunters and the stronger ones like S ranks, and so he knows that guild hunters get all the glory even when they cause trouble. With that, the purple-haired young man clenches his fist tightly, showing his anger. But the protagonist grabs the man in the suit, who gets scared and agrees to understand the situation. So with a smile, Yul says he didn't want to escalate things because he gains nothing from more attention. But the young hunter seems to have a plan in mind, with a very mischievous smile on his face. And so, he says he doesn't know what kind of sponsorship the man had in mind, but he might need to clean up more messes. To be direct, he holds the executive firmly, making him very nervous. The young man asks the guild to sponsor his department, as they have many needs. With that, he asks for 10 billion won, leaving the man in the suit completely shocked. Days later, in a quiet park, the young man takes the opportunity to get some exercise. He then stops for a moment and has a cold drink to rest. After solving the hotel case, he earned a well-deserved 2-day break, and so the young man thinks that he solved everything on his own and even got money from the guild. But the only problem is that his co-workers are staring at him. He thinks that if the news of his reawakening spreads, it will be a pain. So for now, the hunter decides to focus only on managing his labyrinth. The first thing is to fix the walls and revive the monsters inside. The problem is that the total cost of 53 gold is very expensive. But since he has already collected 80 gold, the young man decides to make the investment. With the repairs done, he prepares for the next step of his plan. Suddenly his phone rings, and he wonders who is calling him on his day off. The young man answers and tells the person to get straight to the point because he is on vacation. And so, on the other end of the line, a voice says it's good that he's off at the moment. The woman, named Lee Jung-hee, asks him to find someone for her. Our hero is silent for a moment, and she continues to speak. And she then realizes that the young man has hung up the phone right in her face. And so, he thinks that maybe he doesn't need to revive all the monsters in the labyrinth. This would save gold and be faster if he entered when needed. But he realizes that reviving them all at once could be a problem. The young man gets annoyed and yells at the woman on the phone, but she begs for help. The woman on the other end says he'll want to help when he finds out who the person is. She then reveals that the target's name is Kang Taesin, and the young man is in shock. Even so, he admits he would like to meet this person at least once. With his eyes glowing, he says someone of that level would be very easy to find. Meanwhile, in the same park, a group of elderly people are having fun playing a game. One of the players makes a move, and his opponent shouts in surprise. Our hero approaches the old men, and one of them asks to play again. The hunter feels a powerful aura and realizes that up close it's even stronger. The old man glows with an intense red energy that only the awakened possess. The young man is thoughtful, wondering if that is really the man he is looking for, and so one of the old men then calls out to him and asks if he knows how to play that game. The man asks for help and wants to know the best move to win the match. Our hero then approaches to give advice on the next move. Suddenly his sixth sense is activated, and he perceives imminent danger. The hunter throws himself to the side and dodges a fast and silent attack, and the elderly men are startled to see a weapon stuck in a tree right behind them. And the old man says he can ignore those who approach with bad intentions. Our hero is then sure that his worries were pointless. That man is one of the 5S rank hunters in all of South Korea. This elite hunter is capable of turning anything into a deadly weapon, and this is Kang Taesin, the powerful master of weapons and an S rank hunter. Suddenly, the assailant who tried to attack him appears and calls him master. The man approaches quickly, but the old man doesn't seem happy about it. Then the master of weapons asks our hero if he is from the surveillance department. So, the young man replies that he is just a simple scout from the rescue department. With a smile, he boasts that having many talents is his only flaw. And the older hunter then glares at him and says he would be fine if he weren't so talkative. At that moment, the woman from the phone arrives and asks what the young man was doing there. She informs the master that the trainees are gathered and they need to go back soon. The young woman then asks our hero how he found the old man so quickly, and so he replies that it's because he is very capable and says that his job is done. But the master of weapons stops him from leaving and calls him an arrogant brat. He says that since the young man is also a hunter from the administration, he must follow him. The old man takes him to a large building because he wants to test his skills. Meanwhile, a narration explains that every awakened person has a maximum capacity. This means that no matter how much they try, they can never surpass their limits. However, the system doesn't define everything, as martial arts cannot be measured. In other words, it is possible to become stronger with proficiency in weapons. And it is for this reason that the master trains the young hunters of the new generation. And so all the hunters from the administration gather in a large training room. Our hero is among them and only thinks about returning to his labyrinth. And so the master then calls one of the students and asks how long he has been training. The other students comment that he is one of the few B-rank hunters there. The master says that he has potential, and that's why he is standing in front of everyone. Holding a sword, the old man asks the young hunter a question. He questions what is necessary to be able to wield the weapon correctly. The student replies that it requires brute force and understanding one's abilities. The master of weapons remains silent and doesn't seem to like the answer very much. Then he turns to our hero and asks him the same question. And so, the young man replies that the most important thing is the will to wield the weapon, and the other students are confused and think the other guy's answer was much better. The old hunter asks if he is sure of such a simple answer. He confirms with a smile and thinks that, as expected, the S rank is smart. The master grabs him by the arm and says that he is indeed very arrogant, but despite everything, he admits that was the correct answer to the question. Our hero is a little surprised and just thanks the master for the chance. The older hunter then breaks into a wide and somewhat scary smile. The other student gets furious and shouts that he doesn't accept a rookie being right. The young hunter wonders why the other guy is acting like a child. The master says he will give them both a test, as this goes against the original plan, and they just need to prove their answers, and the old man asks if they accept. The other student accepts immediately, but our hero says he's good and declines. The older hunter says he will choose the other guy and asks if that's okay. He then reveals that passing the test means becoming his official disciple. The young man is shocked at the chance to be trained by an S-rank hunter. That was the chance to become stronger and achieve a high position. The master then asks with a smile if he is more motivated now. Our hero is silent for a moment and thinks about the great opportunity, and so he then clenches his fists and shows that he is determined to accept the challenge. With a smile, he says that the motivation is now more than enough. The test would be held right there in that large, empty training room. The master explains that the test is simple and they need to use the skill he taught, and so whoever wins the challenge will become his disciple, and the two face each other, ready. Our hero then thinks about the other stone that was mentioned by the old man. He remembers that only very powerful awakened can break it, and the young man is confused about the skill the master said he had taught. The audience of students goes wild with anticipation for the start of the test, but he decides to focus, as he is determined to seize this unique opportunity. The master then says he will pass on his skill to them at that moment. He warns that if they don't feel anything, they will fail the test immediately. The old hunter then announces that the test can finally begin. Suddenly, a powerful red aura erupts from the master's body with full force. The pressure of the aura is so intense that the other young man can barely breathe, and he feels like he's going to faint at any moment but tries to resist the power. Our hero, on the other hand, begins to have a vision of a shining blue spear. A beautiful and powerful spear shines brightly under the moonlight in the vision, and the system informs him that he has acquired a new skill and mastered a technique, and the master says that they both have the necessary aptitude and should be proud of it. He explains that normally people either feel nothing or faint on the spot. With a smile, the old hunter prepares to start the next phase of the test. The master then turns to the two and asks which one will prove himself first. The other young man then grips his huge sword with both hands, tightly. He positions himself in front of the large ether stone that glows red, and so, the young man announces that he will be the first and that he will crush the other's will. Our hero just yawns and says he suspected him from the beginning. His rival accuses him of bribing someone to get there. He then prepares to prove that he is right by using his great strength. With a powerful blow, he strikes and shatters the energy stone. The audience is in shock at how easily the stone was broken by him. The master says the young man has mastered the Dragon King's swordsmanship and it wasn't bad. The old hunter then turns and walks towards our hero. The other student glares at him and accuses him of trying to steal his place. Our hero just smiles and asks how someone can live walking on eggshells. The master interrupts the argument and tells the young man that it is now his turn. He admits that his rival's tone annoyed him, but he is stronger in raw power. However, this test is not about strength but about proving his answer. Besides, the master of weapons said that his answer was the correct one, and even though the answer was simple, it was his conviction. So he asks himself what the real reason is for him to use a weapon. The answer to that was already set in his heart from the beginning, so he remembers that his goal is to become like the person who saved him in the past, and so the young man wants other people to be able to feel the same hope he felt, and that is why he became a hunter for the bureau and wants to become stronger, and so the young hunter is determined to become much more powerful than he is now. With a shout, he unleashes his new ability called Heart Piercer. The audience is completely shocked by that demonstration of power. The master of weapons observes everything with a very serious and impressed look. The other young man's jaw drops, and he wonders what the heck that was. The hero then turns and apologizes to his rival for what he is about to do. With a smile, he asks if the senior minds him stealing his place. The master then explains that weapons and skills are just tools. Pointing to the young man, he says that from this day on, he is his disciple. Our hero then breaks into a smile and thanks the old man for the opportunity. The crowd of students celebrates and cheers at the result of the test. The scene changes, and a voice tells a girl that she should have obeyed. A bully pulls the student's hair and says this is what happens to her. A blonde girl scoffs, saying it's sad to see her classmate in that state. The blonde girl then asks if the other one really wanted to help her friend. She continues, saying the young woman should have known who she was messing with. The leader of the bullies glares at her with a wicked, mocking smile. The student on the floor glares back at him with a look of pure hatred. The delinquent taunts her, saying that now she is all alone and has no friends, and so reveals that her friend ended up in the hospital after falling from the roof. Upon hearing this, the anger in the girl's eyes becomes even more intense, and so the bully gets annoyed by her look and says he doesn't like it, and so he says that look just makes him want to strike her and kicks her forcefully. Suddenly, one of his cronies says that the young master has finally arrived. This master is a white-haired man who is called a B-rank hunter. So, the leader of the bullies tells them to keep an eye on the girl and not let her escape. The white-haired man calls him to come along, and the delinquent is surprised. The white-haired man says he called him to a place where there is no one. With a smile, he says it's so they can have fun as they please. Meanwhile, elsewhere, our hero is leaving work at the guild. A colleague congratulates him on becoming the disciple of an S-rank hunter, and he asks if the spear the young man picked is enough, and the young man confirms. The weapon he chose is the evolving spear, which adapts to the user. He complains that it's past time to go home after so many events. His colleague tries to stop him from entering a room, but he easily pushes her away. Inside, a woman is arguing with a guard because she wants to see Chief Seo-yul. She explains that she is there because they are not answering her phone. At that moment, the hero arrives, and the woman recognizes him as the guild chief. The lady shouts his name, and the young man asks if something is wrong. Desperately, she grabs his shirt and starts yelling for her daughter, Yan-hee. The woman reveals that the girl was taken by force by the Yellow Belt gang. Our hero's expression changes completely upon hearing that information. With his eyes glowing red, he asks who exactly took her. The scene shifts to a forest, and one of the bullies asks if it's safe there. The leader says that's why they brought a B-rank hunter along, and so he smiles at the girl and says they need to test who would win a fight. The delinquent tells her not to worry because the monsters there are weak. The girl glares at him with a look full of anger and great determination. In a quick move, she then tries to escape by running in the forest. The leader of the bullies tells the white-haired hunter to catch her quickly. It turns out that another boy also tries to run away to avoid fighting, but before he can get far, someone steps on his foot with great force. The white-haired hunter knocks him to the ground with a powerful kick, and he then steps on the girl's back and says there is no one there to help her. Suddenly, something giant and sharp flies towards them at high speed. The hunter senses the threat and warns that something is coming their way. A powerful blast of energy throws everyone far away. One of the monsters ends up falling to the ground, and the leader of the bullies is terrified. The white-haired hunter tells the young master to run immediately. He faces the threat that has emerged in the forest with a very serious look. Suddenly, a swarm of gigantic insect monsters appears, and so, meanwhile, our hero is talking to someone on the phone and thanks them for the favor. And so, he says he found out that this person was the one who told him where the girl was. And so, the person on the phone replies that they were just responding to a missing person call. This man, named Kang Jung-min, then tells the hero to be very careful, and so our hero replies that it's a little late for him to be worrying about that. He observes the forest and comments that it's a place he would never live in. That area is known as the Yellow Belt and was sealed off after a dungeon break, and despite their appearance, the monsters there are not considered very strong, but he has heard that they are very cunning and difficult to deal with in combat. However, he realizes they are weaker than the red goblins, and the young man runs and thinks that he needs to save the girl as quickly as possible. Suddenly, one of the monsters fires a sharp projectile in his direction, but the young hunter manages to dodge the attack with a quick movement. He finds himself surrounded by a huge swarm, and the system begins to generate his spear. A sphere of energy appears in his hand, and he says he doesn't have time for them. With a smile, he tells the monsters to call all the friends they can, and the creatures then fly towards him, ready to attack with everything they have. A gigantic swarm of monsters gathers and flies towards him relentlessly, and the hero then smiles and comments that they really did have a lot of friends. The giant insects approach him, ready for a mass attack. Without fear, the young man advances towards the swarm to begin the battle. He then starts fighting all the monsters using his blue energy. Despite his confidence, he admits that the situation is becoming dangerous. The system shows that the number of allied units in the labyrinth is decreasing. He realizes that if he attracts more monsters, the labyrinth could end up collapsing. However, he knows he can't handle that number of enemies alone. Faced with the situation, he thinks that in this case, he has only one last option. The young man then says he will have to use his last resort against them, but with a smile, he asks the monsters if they like to play in the water. Then, he unleashes a huge wave of energy that throws everyone far away, and so to finish it off, the young hunter kicks the energy sphere with all his might. With that, his full charge attack creates a huge energy vortex on the ground, and then a large explosion occurs, engulfing everything around it. One of the monsters ends up falling on top of a red goblin that was there. The creature then seems to get very confused by what is happening, and the giant insects are swept away by the strong current of water from the attack. The enormous amount of water ends up completely flooding the entire labyrinth, and so many of the creatures end up being drowned and carried away by the force of the water. He laments because restoring the labyrinth will be a nightmare and will be expensive, but he clenches his fist determined, because this was the only way to win. At least now the place is quiet, and he can move on alone. Meanwhile, the bullies continue to run through the forest, very scared, and so they desperately wonder how long those things will keep chasing them. The leader yells at the hunter, who says there are too many for him to handle alone. The bully then tells him to shut up and calls him completely useless. Suddenly, a sharp blade cuts through the air at impressive speed. One of the cronies is in shock as he sees something fly past him. The leader and the girl are also very surprised by what is happening, and it turns out that one of the monsters was hit right in the head by a sharp weapon, and so the white-haired hunter warns that there are more enemies coming ahead. The leader and the girl then end up cornered at the edge of a cliff. Desperate, he grabs the girl's hair and tells the hunter to do something, and at that moment, a red weapon hits the monster right in front of them. The creature falls to the ground, and the two are left speechless by the scene. The leader of the bullies then shouts and asks fearfully who is there. A voice replies that it is a hunter from the administration and calls him a brat. Our hero then faces the group and asks if they were the ones who dragged the girl here. The bully and the student look at him, completely terrified and confused. With his weapon glowing, he replies that he is a hunter from the bureau and calls him a punk. He repeats the question, wanting to know if they were responsible for all of this, and the girl then shouts his name in complete shock and relief at seeing him there. He hugs her and asks if she is okay, saying it's the first time he's seen her cry. The delinquent then gets the attention of the bureau hunter who is hugging her. He points and says he knows the hero knows the way out and offers money in exchange, and so the student then asks the young man to ignore him and for them to just leave, but he apologizes to the girl who is confused by his attitude. Then, he uses one of his skills to make the student faint, and he lays her on the ground and says he will finish this quickly, so he can take her out of there. With his spear on the ground, he turns and asks the bully what he thinks he's doing. With a wicked smile, he says he is going to do something he can't let the young woman see. The gang leader gets angry and asks if the hunter knows who he is talking to. The hero replies that he knows he is Park Jin-tae, the son of a Supreme Court judge. He also knows about all the crimes the delinquent has committed in the past. The young man accuses him of being a guy who covers up all his crimes using money. Without another word, the young hunter lands a powerful kick on the bully's face. The delinquent is completely shocked by the force and pain of that blow. The hero then grabs him and challenges him to try using his money to get out of this. And so with his eyes glowing, he provokes him and tells him to try to tempt him with money. Then he throws him forcefully towards the forest far away. But the white-haired hunter catches him and attacks the hero with his golden sword, and he turns to the hunter and says that the hunt for the pests is finally over. The white-haired man glares back at him with a serious and challenging look. The bully shouts, calling him a crazy fool and saying he will perish there. The white-haired hunter then advances and attacks the hero with a sword strike. But the young hunter manages to block the attack with his spear easily. The two then face off as their weapons clash with great force, and so he says he was just going to teach them a lesson, but now things have changed a lot. With a serious look, he accuses them of trying to take him down first. The two then continue the battle, exchanging powerful and swift blows. The white-haired hunter wonders why he is being overpowered. He then questions if the young man is really a hunter from the bureau, but he decides it doesn't matter and prepares his next powerful attack. The white-haired hunter advances with his flaming golden sword. His plan is to get close and hit the hero with a fatal blow up close. However, the young man manages to grab the enemy's wrist at the last second. He warns that if the enemy gets that close, he has no other choice. And with that, the young hunter lands a powerful punch on the opponent's face. The blow is so strong that the white-haired hunter flies far away. The bully shouts and asks if he bought his hunter license with money. Our hero is surprised and wonders if that guy was a B-rank hunter. He remembers that his stats increased a lot after hunting the insects. Then the young man realizes that he has finally surpassed a B-rank hunter. With a slight smile, he feels satisfied with his progress and power, and seeing his bodyguard defeated, the bully decides to pick up a rock from the ground. He then throws the rock and shouts, asking who the hero is laughing at. Without difficulty, the young hunter knocks him to the ground using his spear. The delinquent falls hard and hits his face right on the ground. He then asks if the bully has ever been beaten like that before. The delinquent shouts that if someone is angry, they should get more power. The hero concludes that a guy like him shouldn't even exist. The young man tells him not to worry, as he won't make him suffer for long. With the unconscious girl in his arms, he prepares to leave. He then says he'll leave him to be a meal for the hungry beasts. The bully looks back and sees a creature leaping towards him. A pack of shadow wolves with glowing purple eyes suddenly appears. Completely surrounded, he screams desperately for the creatures to back away. The bully screams as he is fiercely attacked by the wolf pack. With the girl in his arms, our hero leaves, leaving the delinquent behind. Thus, the kidnapping of the young Yan, he that took place in the yellow belt, comes to an end. The girl is then returned to her family's arms, and everyone cries with relief. A colleague reports that the person responsible for letting the bully in has already been caught. The incident ends up spreading through various media outlets and becomes news, and the case is concluded with the resignation of the Supreme Court judge, the bully's father. After a while, life seems to return to normal in the city and at the guild. Our hero then receives a notification that a new mission has appeared. The mission is an extermination one, and he needs to defeat the Wasp Queen within 30 days. He remembers seeing the so-called Wasp Queen when he left the Yellow Belt. The creature was a giant insect monster and much more powerful than the others. Because she is always protected by other wasps, she won't be easy to catch. But with a determined smile, the young hunter says he wants her for himself. He knows that if the normal wasps are already strong, the queen must be even more so. The next day, he tells his coworkers that he needs to go somewhere else first. A colleague then reminds him that he needs to finish his paperwork before leaving. The young man just stares at him with a serious look without saying a single word. He then simply ignores the warning and leaves, leaving his colleague alone. He thinks he has a month for the mission, and the wasps will expand their territory. Therefore, he decides he needs to be fully prepared for the battle. Upon arriving at a temple, he is greeted with a scolding for being late. The master of weapons invites him in and says that the training begins now. That place was the home and training ground of the powerful master hunter. He is then surprised to find out that he has become a direct disciple. The master tells him not to feel pressured, as there are only 2 above him. The old man then takes him to a room where the other direct disciples are. One of the students says he is ready, and the master thanks him for the good work. The young hunter then faces the other disciple with a very serious look. The other young man observes him in silence, and a tense atmosphere arises. And so the master then reveals the object of the training, which is the jaw of an iron gull, and he says that was the first creature that almost sent him to his doom in the past. And so with his hands on the object, he announces that the training for this time is complete. Suddenly a powerful red aura erupts from the old master's body with full force. With absurd strength he then manages to open the monster's jaw easily. Even with all his power, he admits that the jaw remains very resistant. He then joins the 2 parts of the jaw together again without any difficulty. The other disciples are impressed, and our hero wonders if his body is made of steel. The master then turns and tells the young hunter that it is now his turn to try. He holds the object and thinks that his current level already exceeds that of a B-rank hunter. Even if he can't open it all the way, he believes he can at least move it a little. But the old master observes him with an expression of complete surprise on his face. The young man is shocked to realize he can't move the jaw even a little bit. The master explains that the training will develop his strength and tells him to keep trying, and so he warns him that there will be no other training until he can open the jaw. Our hero becomes desperate and continues trying to open the object with all his might. The other disciple observes him and thinks he already knew he was just the master's favorite. The scene changes, and we see the other disciple leaving the dojo after another training session. He remembers that he has been at the Martial Arts Association for 2 years, training very hard. But the one who became a direct disciple was a guy from the administration who had just arrived. Leaning on the railing, he thinks that no matter how he looks at it, it's all very unfair. Suddenly a voice greets him and wishes a good day to Senior Jang Jun-soo. It's our hero, who congratulates him for placing second in the last test. He approaches and says that even on a holiday, it's always good to arrive early to train, and so the young man tells the other to speak to him informally, but the senior refuses immediately. The older young man then asks if he cleaned the entire dojo by himself, and he confirms, and he then asks the rookie not to do that anymore because it makes others uncomfortable. And so the hero turns and asks if there is really a need to divide the chores there. He explains that being a direct disciple doesn't make him want to push the work onto others. With a smile, he says that everyone is there to succeed together in the end. The senior stares at the rookie and thinks to himself that this is very annoying, and so he remembers that for the past 2 weeks, the young man has trained more than everyone else without fail. In addition, he doesn't behave like a superior even though he is a direct disciple. The hero also gets along well with everyone else and is always joking around with his colleagues. He trains like a maniac and keeps trying to open the monster's jaw. Jang-Jun-Soo admits that it's because of all this that he finds him even more annoying, but he also confesses that the rookie is exactly who he would like to be. Suddenly, the stone jaw begins to move and crack a little. The young man gets excited and celebrates, saying he almost got it. And suddenly, the senior offers him a bottle of water, and the young man is surprised. He advises him not to overdo it in training and calls him by his formal name. With a smile, the hero comments that it took him a while to drop the formalities. The two seem to have finally made peace and become true friends. And suddenly, they hear the sound of a horn and wonder what it is. And the senior explains that it is the sound of the Overcross Guild going out on a mission. And so he says that the guild works day and night because it has many members in its ranks. The scene changes, and we see a sunny and very peaceful forest. And so a group of hunters emerges from a purple portal in the middle of the woods. One of them comments that the job ended faster than he expected. The other says it was fast, especially since they captured a steel orc. One of the hunters then asks if it's allowed to capture the monsters, and so his colleague explains that they sell the creatures for billions, and that's where their salary comes from. The young man then shows a necklace from the orc tribe and asks if it's worth anything. Inside the energy cage, the creature glares at the two, baring its teeth in anger, and so the hunter tells him to throw the necklace away and says that no one would buy that trash. The steel orc then roars in anger and prepares to attack with everything it has. He then breaks the energy cage and frees himself, leaving the two terrified. The scene changes, and we see our hero and his team closing a gate in the city, and so the squad leader asks if they should go back now that they have finished everything, but the young man says he is going straight to the Martial Arts Association to train, but he declines the invitation and says he can't go because the master is not at the dojo. And suddenly his colleague looks up, startled, and asks what is happening. At that moment, the hero receives an emergency alert for all teams. The alert says that a 3-star boss monster that was being transported has escaped, and the location of the accident is precisely the Korean Martial Arts Association. Amid the destruction, one of the disciples wonders where that arc came from. A student shouts for a young female disciple to run from there as fast as she can. The little girl worries about the master while the orc faces Jang-Jun-Soo. Even though he is all injured, Jang-Jun-Soo remains standing and faces the creature. In a flashback, he remembers that he always thought of himself as a genius since he joined Overcross. He comforted himself by saying that using other guilds was a privilege of the strong. However, he was left behind by his companions in a cave, and so in there, he realized that he was just another replaceable piece in the guild. It was only then that the young man realized how cruel the world really was. But even so, he holds his sword and doesn't want to believe that the world is rotten. He remembers who saved him and now also wishes to help someone, and he wants to make the world a better place as the orc attacks him with full force. And he says that's how he endured for 2 years and calls the monster a bald brute. The young man can barely stand, but he needs to hold on as long as he can. He struggles to resist the orc's attack for 1 more minute, or at least for 1 more second, but the monster throws him away. Suddenly, a bright light hits the orc's arm with full force. A voice congratulates him and says he did well as the orc retreats. Soo is in shock as he realizes that it is our hero who has arrived, and so the hero tells him to leave the rest to him, and the system calls him to the labyrinth. With that, the scene quickly changes to inside a white labyrinth. He thinks that he dragged the orc into the labyrinth, acting all cool, but he runs from the monster and realizes that the creature is stronger than he imagined. He wonders if the steel orc really just fought with Overcross. The monster starts to destroy the labyrinth's walls with its brute force, and so, fleeing from the creature, he admits that it will be difficult to fight it alone at that moment. But in that case, he has a plan, and with a smile, he creates a sphere of energy for the orc. Without hesitation, the young man throws the blue energy sphere far away with a quick movement. With this, several smaller monsters are summoned and begin to attack the giant creature. While the orc is distracted, he prepares his red spear to find an opening. The steel beast then roars in anger and prepares for combat against the new enemies. And with just 1 blow, the monster manages to throw away the creatures that were attacking it. Our hero is surprised to see his enemy destroying all his allies with ease, and so the system warns that his allies are disappearing, and he gets annoyed for having repaired the labyrinth, and so understands that normal monsters are not enough and that he needs to use a risky plan. The young man then decides that he will have to call a much more powerful guy for the fight. Then a giant paw steps on the labyrinth floor, revealing itself little by little to them, and suddenly, a huge creature emerges to face the steel orc in that arena. That was the labyrinth boss, a frightening creature called Zizuri. The labyrinth boss then charges with full force towards the steel orc, who prepares itself, and Zizuri grabs the orc with great force and immobilizes it for a brief moment. With the opponent distracted, our hero finally manages to find an opening to attack. Taking the opportunity, he advances with his red spear to hit the weak spot. The creature then screams in pain as it is attacked from both sides at the same time. Without mercy, the labyrinth boss bites the orc's head with its sharp teeth. With the help of his ally, the young man manages to land a fatal blow on the orc's chest. Suddenly, the system announces that Ziori has been defeated and that respawn has been disabled. The young man is furious because the steel orc ended up defeating his labyrinth's boss, and he shouts that his boss was reduced to nothing and can't believe it. Angrily, he kicks the orc's body, which is thrown far away in the labyrinth, and so the system then announces that the steel rain trap has suddenly been activated. With this, a large number of steel arrows fly towards the enemy. The arrows hit the orc head-on, but it remains standing despite all the damage. The hero takes the chance and pierces the monster with his spear, using all his strength. With his eyes glowing, he shouts that he will deliver one more blow to end it. So with the blow from the ceiling, the orc finally falls to the ground, and the fight seems to be over. He smiles and comments that he installed several traps there for emergencies. Seeing the result of his strategy, the young man concludes that his plan was worth it, and suddenly, his combat system opens a blue screen in front of him with a warning, and the alert says that the labyrinth's durability is low and it might collapse. And so, the young man thinks that it would have been very difficult to win without the help of his labyrinth. But suddenly, the orc's body on the ground starts to move again, and he gets scared. The monster he thought he had defeated starts to get up, glowing red. The creature then lets out a furious roar, much louder than before. The system warns that the steel orc has entered a state of total fury, and so, the young man comments that the enemy is persistent and prepares to get out of there. With a portal, he says they will finish this fight outside the labyrinth, and the scene then returns to the dojo, which was completely empty and silent. Sue wonders where our hero went, since everyone was evacuated. Suddenly a blue energy portal appears in the courtyard, leaving him very confused. He then extends his hand towards the portal, which shines with great intensity. The senior feels a large amount of mana coming from inside the portal. To his surprise, our hero comes out of the portal, still fighting the steel orc. The creature, now in berserk mode, seems even stronger and more threatening than before, and the young hunter continues to trade blows with the giant monster in the middle of the dojo's courtyard. The young man is confused, wondering if he is defending himself because the orc is tired, but he realizes that the monster's attacks are stronger, and his muscles ache. However, the young hunter feels that his body is also different from before. He remembers that the 2 weeks of intense training were not in vain. Even feeling that his body could break at any moment, the power continues to surge. And more than anything, he can finally feel the results of his effort. With this, his weapon glows with an intense red energy, ready for the attack. The hero then advances and lands a powerful blow right on the giant creature's face. The steel monster ends up spitting out some red liquid due to the impact. With a confident smile, the young man comments that this fight is quite fun. Without wasting time, he attacks again with a devastating energy blow, and the steel creature feels the pain of the second blow but still doesn't give up fighting. The bureau hunter faces his opponent with a look full of confidence and mockery. Suddenly, the orc manages to grab the young man's weapon with its giant, strong hand. With a furious look, the creature prepares to counterattack with all its strength. The monster then throws him with full force onto the courtyard floor, creating a huge crater. The impact is so strong that the young hunter is thrown far across the courtyard. Lying on the ground, he realizes that the orc can still use its head even when furious, and the young man gets up and sees that the creature has driven the hero's weapon into the ground with force. Then the monster advances on the unarmed young man for the final attack, and suddenly something flies at high speed towards the furious creature. It's the senior, who lands a powerful kick right on the steel monster's face. He shouts that he will buy some time and tells the hero to grab a weapon quickly. However, the orc throws him away with a single blow without any difficulty. The young man then shouts in pain as he is thrown far away with great force. But the young hunter says he has already gotten a weapon and holds one of the orc's teeth. With a pull, he manages to rip the tusk from the monster's mouth with his bare hands. He says he will use all the energy left in his body for the final blow. The giant creature seems to be confused by the pain and the loss of its sharp tooth. With his eyes glowing, he shouts that he will detonate the energy to end it all. Then he shoves the tusk he ripped out into the creature's mouth with all his strength. Now the steel monster has an improvised weapon full of energy in its mouth. With a punch, he pushes the tusk even deeper down his enemy's throat. The energy then explodes and the creature's head is completely overwhelmed by the blow. The system announces that he has obtained a demonic dagger as a reward for the victory. Looking at the monster's body, he gives thanks, as the fight was good training, and he believes that thanks to this battle, he will be able to advance to the next training. Meanwhile, a voice asks the senior lying on the ground if he is okay. The young man is surprised, as he recognizes that voice from somewhere familiar. It's our hero, who extends his hand to help him up from the ground. The young man says his colleague has finally woken up and that he's tough. All bruised, the senior realizes that it was our hero who helped him at that moment. The young man is confused and tells his friend to just rest, as there is no one else there. With the battle finally over, he tells his colleague that it's all over now, and so the scene then shifts to the next day at the management bureau headquarters. A crowd of reporters and photographers is gathered in front of the building. Suddenly, one of them shouts and points to someone who is arriving at the location. It turns out that the person who arrived was the director of Overcross, named Bak Junwon. So the press surrounds him and asks him to say a few words about the incident. The director then approaches and says he would like to apologize to the victims. He explains that the orc had a high research value for science, and so the man then concludes by saying he will cooperate with the investigation and leaves. Suddenly, one of the reporters points and recognizes our hero arriving. The press then surrounds him and asks how a D rank managed to defeat the orc. Being helped by a colleague, he apologizes and says the interview will have to be later. But a journalist asks if the bureau's response wasn't too weak. He continues, saying that the bureau should have prevented an incident like that. The young man gets irritated by the question, and his colleague tells him to just ignore it. His friend explains that the guy is a paid YouTuber who creates controversy and confusion. With a smile, our hero realizes they're using all sorts of dirty tricks, and he then tells his colleague he'll be right back, and his friend is completely confused. The young man approaches the YouTuber and asks if the broadcast is live at the moment. With a serious look, he says he wants people to hear what he is about to say, and furiously, he shouts in the camera, asking if it feels good to be paid to clean up the mess. He points and says they make the mess, and the bureau has to clean it all up. And the crowd and the YouTuber are completely shocked and speechless at his attitude. With a smile, he turns and asks the director if he isn't right. The man then just glares back at him with a very sinister smile on his face. Suddenly, his colleague grabs him by the hair and starts dragging him away. The friend apologizes and says the young man is not well as they flee from the crowd. The director then asks his assistant if that was the guy who talked back to him. The old man says the young man seems like a cub that doesn't fear a tiger and glares at him. With his eyes glowing red, he orders his section chief to crush the young man, and the scene then changes and cuts to a conference room inside a building. On a screen, a video of the YouTuber with glasses who was at the scene is displayed. A woman explains that the media has been posting about assistant manager Yol, and his friend says the comment was inappropriate but the punishment is excessive. He argues that the large guild is in the wrong and the videos were manipulated, and so another man says that the manipulation doesn't matter because everyone is talking about it. The head of the surveillance division, Hein Ji-ik, says he must be punished, and the colleague retorts, saying that Overcross is the one that should be punished for the mistake. Hein Ji-ik gets angry and slams his fist on the table with great force. He then yells at the other man and asks if he has lost his mind. Suddenly, an older man asks the two to stop fighting immediately. He asks if our hero's rescue rate was 100%, and he confirms. The man says he is a valuable asset and that they need to maintain authority. Hein Ji-ik then turns and asks if the colleague has any other plan. The older man says that since they made a move, a response will come. That was Park Gwang-soo, the director of the city's management bureau, and the scene then ends and shows an empty, well-lit hallway from the sunlight, and someone then knocks on the door of director Park Gwang-soo's room, who was waiting for him. A voice invites him in, and our hero opens the door slowly and carefully, and so the young man then asks if the director called him to talk about something important. The older man then asks the young man to sit down first for their conversation. He says he has something very important to discuss with the bureau hunter. A cup of hot tea is served to the young man during the serious conversation, and so director asks what he thought, and the young man says he could open a cafe. Satisfied with the answer, the older man says he is a little curious about him. He then asks what rank the young man thinks he would get if he retook the test, and so the young man replies that he is not sure, but it definitely wouldn't be his current rank. The director agrees and says he has done things that a D rank couldn't do. However, he warns that they have also had many problems because of the young man. Our hero is confused and wonders if he wants him to reveal all his power. Director Park Kwang-soo is a master politician who has been in office for a long time. He remembers his colleague's advice to be humble and honest in the conversation. Despite the advice, he is unsure if he should mention the labyrinth to him, but the director reassures him and says he won't ask how he got strong. He explains that what matters now is that the bureau needs his power. And getting straight to the point, the man says he is going to send him to the provinces. The scene changes, and we see the bureau building during a beautiful sunset in the city. Director Baek says the investigation is over and he can leave. He then asks Chief An what he thinks about our hero from the bureau. The chief asks why he cares about a simple first responder like the young man. With a wicked look, he replies that nothing is more annoying than an insect in his sight. The chief then asks if that's why he kicked him out to the countryside. Annoyed by the question, the director asks if the two are close by any chance, and so suddenly, they spot the young hunter at the end of the building's hallway. Upon hearing the voice, the young man turns to face who was calling him. The director says they were destined to meet and that he heard the news, and so with a smile he reveals that the young man is going to the provinces, and the chief is shocked. The young man says the transfer notice isn't even out yet and asks if the old man is stalking him. With a smile, he tells the director not to worry, as it's only for 6 months. The man shakes his hand and comments that the young hunter is very positive about it. He then explains that he heard only section chiefs are sent there, and so, the director says that Chief Ann probably didn't know and that he was going to announce it later. With a smile, the hero reveals that he was promoted and is now the new assistant manager. The white-haired man and his assistant are shocked by the double promotion. He then asks if the director isn't happy, and the man congratulates him with a smile. The director questions if the administration now promotes people on a whim. The young man replies that it means they don't want to lose a great talent. With auras of power, the two face each other in a moment of pure tension and anger. The assistant then interrupts the fight and tells his boss to leave now. The director says he got distracted for a second and seems to calm down a bit. He and his assistant then turn and start to walk away, but suddenly, the white-haired man turns and offers the young man some advice. He says that trying to drag him elsewhere was a mistake on their part. The hero replies that his priority as a first responder will never change, and so the two then continue to walk, and the young hunter watches them from the window. And suddenly, the assistant calls the director's name with a look of concern, and so with a powerful punch the white-haired man shatters the floor with his anger. The force of the blow is so great that the hallway floor is completely destroyed. Furiously he yells and calls his enemies wretched, insignificant insects. The scene returns to director Park Kwang-soo's room as he observes the city, and so the director is standing near his office window with a cup in his hand. He tells the young man not to worry, because on the surface, it's just a demotion, but the director warns that he needs to show results so that no one can touch him. The young hunter listens attentively to his superior's words in the office, and the older man then notices that the young man seems to have something on his mind. He thanks the director and says there is something he would like to ask, and so with a smile the young man says that since he's going anyway, he has a request to make. The director takes a sip of his tea, thinking about the request the young man made. Looking at the city through the window, he admits that the young hunter is truly special. The scene then returns to the office, and the guild's hallway seems very empty. A blonde colleague is shocked that the rookie became a manager and was sent far away. He asks the section chief if he knew, and the older man confirms immediately. The blonde man worries about the work, but the chief says they will manage. And so in addition, the rookie got a week off, and the chief tells him to call him for dinner. The colleague then calls the hero, who answers, saying he is very busy at the moment. The protagonist replies that he is doing his overdue homework, and the other is confused. It turns out he is dressed in military gear in the middle of several insect monsters. He explains that he is clearing a wasp nest for an extermination mission. He then hangs up on his friend and says he will call back later. The hero remembers that he only has 3 more days to complete that mission, but the young man realizes that the creatures are already producing new troops. However, he doesn't care and says he will fight as long as he can still move. With a powerful leap, he advances towards the swarm of monsters in the air. His eyes glow with power, and he prepares for the intense combat. Suddenly a new, much more powerful type of wasp appears on the battlefield, and so the bureau hunter then begins to fight against the new creatures in the air. He is surprised, as he didn't expect the queen could create these monsters. The system then reveals that those are the dangerous swift wasps, and they are like bullets, and the queen only creates them as a last resort because of the energy cost. The young man knows that if the fight drags on, he will end up being surrounded by them, and so before that happens the hero decides to use one of his abilities. One of the monsters is sucked with force into the blue energy vortex. He says he can still handle them using the labyrinth's traps. In addition, the spear will unbalance the enemies and clear a path to the nest. The wasp queen then appears and prepares for combat against the invader. The giant creature seems to sense the hero's presence approaching her. The hunter continues flying and fighting to reach the queen's nest. He notices that the wasp's behavior has changed to avoid his weapon. With the swift wasps and the new strategy, the truth becomes clear to the young man. The monster queen had been suspicious of him for some time in the nest. With a smile, he feels honored that she is using her brain to try to stop him. But it turns out that our hero also already had a plan in mind for this. He cannot summon monsters in the labyrinth because the boss was defeated before. So the young man has only one plan and prepares to put it into practice now. And so he enters the labyrinth and begins to suck the monsters into the portal. His plan is to put a minimum number of creatures inside his labyrinth. And then the young man exits the labyrinth for the final phase of his plan. With the monsters trapped, he positions himself to attack the queen's nest. With a smile, he says he will use the spear for his final attack. The young man then flies at full speed towards the explosion in the wasp nest, and so he then lands in the middle of the nest, ready for the confrontation with the queen. With a defiant look, he provokes her and tells her to stop hiding. The wasp queen then finally appears and faces the invader in her nest. The creature then uses its special ability called the Queen's Scepter. Our hero observes the situation with a serious and very focused look. He realizes that the Queen's pheromones have become stronger to call for reinforcements. The young man then flies deeper into the nest to continue his hunt. Suddenly a powerful monster attacks him, and his sixth sense warns him of the danger. He realizes she didn't call the others, but a special bodyguard. The name of that powerful creature was Winglash, the queen's secret weapon. The young man is surprised that she created something so strong just to stop him, but he understands that summoning the monster means she is vulnerable. He says that when the bodyguard falls, it will be easy to finish off the queen. The creature then faces him with its glowing red eyes. Ready, the hero draws the monster into his vortex, but the creature manages to escape. He then tries to ignore the bodyguard to attack the queen first, but the creature attacks him from behind and prevents him from reaching his target. The young hunter then manages to defend himself from the attack with his spear. A large explosion of energy occurs, throwing them both far away, but the monster grabs him with all its might and starts to fly away from the nest. The young man is shocked and calls the creature accursed for its action. He realizes that the monster cut off its own arm to avoid being sucked in. Even injured, the creature continues to fly with its very powerful wings. Meanwhile, the wasp queen prepares to attack the hero from a distance. The young man says the two of them are annoying him and prepares his next attack. He warns that no matter what they do, nothing will change the outcome. A huge energy vortex sucks everything around it with great force. With this, both creatures are sucked into the hero's labyrinth. The young man comments that the plan changed a bit, but that's not so bad. With that, he warns the creature not to move recklessly inside. The young hunter explains that he restructured the entire labyrinth for that moment. He then calls himself crazy for talking to monsters and activates his traps. With a simple flick of his finger, he triggers all the traps in the location. The steel rain trap is activated, and a shower of arrows flies over them. The creature then protects the queen, using its wings as a shield against the arrows. The young man is surprised that the creature protected the queen in the nest with a flap of its wings. But he reveals with a smile that the arrows are not coming from just one direction. The monster is hit from behind, and its body begins to catch fire from the damage. He faces the creatures and says he warned them that nothing would change, no matter the effort. With that, the young man reveals that he filled the entire place with traps for them. Now that the queen's ultimate weapon has been defeated, the fight seems to have come to an end. With a smile, he asks if it's now just the two of them for the final showdown.